It is well known that Ptolemy, in his attempt to establish Greek astronomy on a sound scientific foundation, drew upon ancient observations made by Babylonian sky watchers in order to develop his models for predicting the motions of the sun, moon, and planets. What was true in Ptolemy's time remains true today. In order to fine-tune their theories on such fundamental matters as the length of the day or changes in the Earth's rate of rotation, astronomers analyze ancient observations of the moon made by ancient Babylonian, Chinese, and Arabic astronomers. In a recent book on the role of ancient observations in modern astronomy, John Steele underscored the point. Quote, "Astronomy always has been and still is a science that relies on the use of past observations. Unlike most sciences, astronomy can never be truly experimental. Astronomers can only observe the astronomical phenomena that present themselves. Perhaps uniquely in the sciences, astronomers, therefore, are forced to rely upon empirical data collected by their predecessors." End of quote. Yet while modern astronomers regularly employ ancient astronomical observations recorded in Babylonian diary texts and Chinese annals to test their measurements and formulate their theories, they typically pay little heed to the innumerable ancient artworks depicting the respective celestial bodies. This decision represents a significant oversight. Consider the example provided by the so-called Lamat sign, one of the most familiar glyphs in the Mayan codices, long believed to denote the planet Venus. In the Dresden Codex, as elsewhere, the Lamat glyph is often coupled with the prefix chak, signifying red or great. And given the fact that various Maya cultures denoted the morning star by the name red or great star, the phrase chak ek is typically translated as great star Venus. The Lamat sign is archaic in nature, early exemplars appearing already in pre-classic times, circa 1000 to 400 BCE. Martha McCree emphasized the remarkable continuity of these images and their attendant symbolism over the millennia. Quote, "The Venus star logograph is depicted on portable objects from the pre-classic, classic, and post-classic periods into the 16th century. This continuity of an image that is graphically complex and semantically consistent is evidence not of the borrowing of a word or concept, but of the transmission of a specific image over an extensive geographic and temporal range." End of quote. A number of recent studies have questioned the glyph's direct link to Venus, with various scholars arguing that the Lamat sign serves as a generic term for star rather than signifying any particular planetary body. That said, the general consensus among Mayanists appears to be that the Lamat sign, red ek, is a logogram denoting, quote, star, planet, Venus, end of quote. How then are we to understand the great star of Mayan cosmology? The first point to be made is that the great red star was almost certainly not the planet Venus. Rather, it was the planet Mars, or Mars and Venus in conjunction. This identification is explicit among the Skidi Pawnee, renowned for their astronomy-based religious beliefs, who describe the mythical morning star as a powerful warrior and red in color. According to the Skidi creation myth, a grand conjunction between Mars and Venus marked the origin of all living beings. Quote, "The second god placed in the heavens was Evening Star, known to the white people as Venus. She was a beautiful woman. By speaking and waving her hands, she could perform wonders. Through this star and Morning Star, all things were created." Analogous reports will be found among other Amerindian tribes, although it must be admitted that the evidence is often disjointed in nature and open to alternative interpretations. Among the Puget Indians of the Northwest Coast, the morning star is not only described as red, it is carefully distinguished from the evening star, which is described as white. So too the Osage remember the morning star as a red god. Quote, "Great star or red star, a male being, is the morning star." End of quote. The very same idea is common to the Delaware Indians. Quote, "The Delaware call Morning Star the Great Star or Red Star." End of quote. The recurring emphasis among Amerindian cultures upon the red color of the great star must command our attention. As the most prominent red star in the sky, it stands to reason that ancient sky watchers would have described Mars as red or ruddy in color. Venus, on the other hand, typically presents a whitish color and is rarely, if ever, denoted by a name signifying red. Equally telling is the fact that in all of the tribes referenced above, the mythical morning star is always described as a male warrior, exactly as in Mesoamerican lore. Here, too, it is difficult, if not impossible, to find an ethnographic report describing the planet Venus as a masculine warrior anywhere on the continent apart from disputed examples from Mesoamerica. Given the antiquity of these Amerindian mythological traditions, not to mention the likely common ancestry and historical relation between the vast majority of the indigenous tribes on the North American continent, it stands to reason that the traditions attached to the morning star in Mesoamerican narratives and codices belong to the same general belief system. In short, whether it is the red color ascribed to the great star, or its masculine nature or intimate connection to war, the preponderance of evidence favors an identification with the planet Mars, the red planet par excellence. To return to the unique constellation depicted in the Lamont glyph, if Mayanists are in agreement that the Lamont glyph has something to do with stars and/or Venus, exactly what the image represents remains a matter of much conjecture. If the four-rayed star represents a star or Venus, what are we to make of the four circular dots? Susan Milbrath, an anthropologist specializing in ancient Mesoamerican astronomy, suggested that the glyph has reference to the four phases of Venus's appearance and disappearance. Quote, the fact that there are four circles and a cross-shaped frame naturally suggests the four phases of Venus associated with the four different directions. End of quote. Although a great deal of ink has been employed in discussing the possible astronomical significance of the Lamont's role in Mesoamerican symbolism, precious little thought has been devoted to the natural, historical roots of the glyph itself. Most scholars, with Milbrath, have concluded that the glyph is abstract in nature and encodes some arcane astronomical knowledge about Venus. The possibility that the Lamont glyph faithfully depicted an actual star or constellation in the prehistoric sky has never been entertained to the best of my knowledge. Yet there is much reason to believe that this is exactly what the icon represents, namely an accurate depiction of a great star during the prehistoric period. The fact that analogous pictographs will be found around the globe offers compelling evidence in support of this proposition. A Nutsi cylinder seal purportedly dating to the mid-2nd millennium BCE depicts a star surrounded by four dots. The resemblance between the Mesopotamian and Mesoamerican glyphs is undeniable. Not only is there a central four-rayed star, but four circles or orbs are set in the corners, exactly as in the Lamont sign. Not unlike the longevity of the Lamont glyph in Mesoamerican iconography, the quadripartite star symbol persisted for millennia in Mesopotamia. The symbolic importance of the stellar image is indicated by the fact that Assyrian kings had it depicted on their royal garments. Other Mesopotamian cylinder seals substitute a flower-like form or cruciform structure for the central star. One early cylinder seal represents a four-petaled flower star with four circles or dots at its corners. In another cylinder seal, a cruciform structure is represented together with circular dots. While the most common form of the Lamont in Mesoamerica shows a central four-rayed star, other early examples of the glyph show a flower-like object or cross instead. As we will discover, these variant forms, all familiar symbols of stars among Amerindian cultures, offer a valuable clue as to the celestial origins of the Lamont glyph. What are we to make of this iconographic evidence? If nothing else, the presence of analogous stellar images on opposite sides of the Atlantic in very early times suggests the probability that such artworks encode some readily observable astronomical reality, be it a prominent star or constellation. Yet the fact remains that it is impossible to point to an object in the present sky that depicts a four-rayed star surrounded by four dots. Hence the mystery presented by these widespread anomalous stellar images. I discussed the Lamont glyph and the many faces of Venus in other works, noting its possible relationship to the planet Venus. At the time, I was operating under the assumption that the image depicted a conjunction of Mars and Venus in which the red planet appeared in front of the larger orb, but I had no idea how to explain the four smaller dots surrounding the central star. Upon discussing the matter with Anthony Perrott in 2002, he pointed out that the dots are indicative of intense synchrotron radiation produced by four parallel Birkeland currents resulting from a high current Z-pinch event. According to Perrott, quote, the only known mechanism that produces synchrotron radiation are electrons spiraling about a magnetic field at nearly the speed of light. Indeed, in high-energy density plasma experiments conducted at the Los Alamos labs in the 1990s, Perrott himself had generated very similar images. In the image on the left, one finds a close analog to the classic Lamotte sign depicted in the first figure here, in which a central star is surrounded by 4 small circles. In the figure on the right, the central star takes on a rosette-shaped image not unlike that depicted in other figures here. I returned to the Lamotte symbolism in The Great Star, published in 2002, and once again reached out to Dr. Perrott for instruction in clarifying the various structures in question. In 2009, he wrote me as follows, quote, of course this symbol is found all over the place. It is indeed Venus and Mars in front, but the quincunx is yet in front of Mars. See my Physica Scripta article that purposely does not show everything yet. Too early, and I'll have to find an alias to publish under. End of quote. Alas, in the intervening years, Tony has yet to elaborate on his groundbreaking experimental findings which help elucidate the testimony provided by the ancient pictographs and glyphs associated with the celestial bodies. Yet one thing is certain, in the case of the Lamotte sign, a pictograph is indeed worth 1,000 words. In summary, the Lamotte sign will never be explained by reference to the present sky or to the familiar periodicities of the planet Venus. Indeed, it is our position that the stellar image in question represents a veritable smoking gun pointing to an extraordinary planetary conjunction in relatively recent prehistory, likely during the Neolithic period. If so, and if in fact the Lamotte sign depicts a grand conjunction between Mars and Venus during the brief period when the 2 planets were aligned along a shared polar axis, it follows that high-energy discharge events characterize this conjunction, and it must have been a memorable and likely very dangerous period in Earth history.